Hello everybody, and welcome to today's product demo for Veeam Backup and Replication and Backup Storage Best Practices. My name is Kirill Mironov. I'm an Inside Systems Engineer here at Veeam, and I will be your host for today. So I see that people are still joining, but I think, okay, let's slowly start by the end, by the time when everybody joins, I think we will get to the interesting bits. So once again, hello everybody. Just a few things to mention about this session. All the attendees are muted. I would suggest if you have like any questions, any requests, just please drop them in the Q&A section, in the Q&A chat in here. The session is, of course, it's recorded. It will be available, I think, starting from Monday on our website. So in case if you miss something, if you want to go back or if you want to revise a few things from the session, you can do it watching the recording. So without further ado, let's start. So first of all, of course, what we will cover today. We shall talk about what you should consider while building your backup targets, how to save storage space with ReFS and XFS, how to leverage from the storage integrations. We'll talk about air-gapped backup repositories, and we'll have a quick Q&A session. I actually hope we will have enough time for that, since the session will be rather fast-paced, and I have a lot of things to tell you about today. But we shall see. If in the worst case scenario, if we do not have enough time for the Q&A, I promise I will reach out to you by email and I will answer all your questions. So that part should be covered anyway, but we shall see. Okay, let's start with an overall introduction of Veeam Availability Suite. Veeam Availability Suite is a package that consists of two of our solutions. First of all, of course, it's Veeam Backup and Replication. It's our main solution that basically realizes all the data protection tasks, so all the backups and replication, well, hence the name, plus all the restores, the failovers, tests, and the routing of the backups is made through Veeam Backup and Replication. And Veeam One is a monitoring and reporting solution for your infrastructure, whether it is virtual one, physical one, does not matter. It still gathers information from there and shows you in the app itself. And of course, it monitors the backup infrastructure. So both of these solutions comprised, they offer a full visibility and full data protection of your infrastructure. If maybe you already used any of our products before, or maybe you have read about our products, so most of them, they have these three components that are essential to function. First of all, of course, it's Veeam Backup Server. This is the brains of the operation. This is the control sensor. And Veeam Backup Server basically realizes all the tasks, and you control the Veeam Backup Server through the Backup Server console. Then the second one is the Veeam Backup Proxy. Veeam Backup Proxy is, let's say, it's some kind of a workhorse. So Veeam Backup Proxy is a role assigned to any of the machines in your infrastructure that will realize the data movement, compression, the duplication, so on. So basically, it does the heavy lifting bit. And of course, Veeam Backup Repository is the topic of our discussion today. This is a place where you keep all your backups. It has many different types, many different flavors, and we shall talk about this for the rest of the presentation. Right, okay, so the high-level architecture of the backup infrastructure using Veeam Backup and Replication will probably look something like this. This is a simplified version. So that's how probably you would integrate the solution into your production environment. On the left side, you see the source hosts. You control all your backup operations through Veeam Backup Server, which does the backups from the production hosts. It creates the backups, the proxies in a load balancing mode. They process these backups and put them into the backup repository, from which you can offload these backups into tapes if you want, for longer retention or for compliance matters. We shall talk about that too a bit later on. And of course, you can also offload some of the backups or all the backups, or basically whatever you need, into the object storage for redundancy purposes or for longer retention. The next one would be, let's say, more detailed approach to integrating Veeam solution into your backup infrastructure. So let's say you have a production environment, you have a disaster recovery environment, and you have a remote location. And yeah, I know this slide is rather busy and it is scary, but trust me, it is really simple. So in the production environments, on the left, again, you have your source hosts, you have your production storage. Then, of course, you have the Veeam backup server that controls all the backup infrastructure. So it creates the backups from the source hosts. In our case, in the illustration, it leverages the storage integration. So it creates the storage snapshots. Then these backups are processed in the load balancing mode by the proxies and put them into the backup repository, where, again, these backups can be offloaded to tape, or they can be offloaded to DR sites via backup copy option, and both replication. Apologies. So backup copy option and replication option, they have a possibility to leverage the one accelerators. So you can have the replicas in your DR site and additional copy of your backup or your backups in the repository of the DR site, from which, again, you can offload them into the object storage. And since in our scenario, we have also another remote location, like another branch office of your organization, and you have two Veeam backup servers, both of them, they can be controlled through the enterprise manager. So basically, you have a possibility to have one point of management for all your Veeam backup servers and all your backup infrastructure just from one place. Okay, let's click through this. Right, okay, so, and let's speak about the backup repositories themselves. So first of all, it is really important to mention that the performance of the repository impacts the performance of the whole backup infrastructure. And it is rather hard to underestimate the importance of a good and reliable backup repository. Well, that's general, like in itself, backup repository is actually one of the most commonly reported sources of slow backup performance and restore jobs. So the RTOs, in case of this slow performance, will definitely be impacted. For the best practices, just an overall for the repository, this could be just ensure that you always comply with a 3-to-1 rule. The 3-to-1 rule being 3 copies of your data to different medias and one of them off-site. Right, so it is always recommended to have the closer, the better to this setup. Right. For the repositories, the physical ones are recommended where possible and combined with the proxy role that we have spoken a bit before, using the backup from storage snapshots, that would be really a perfect scenario. So for recommendations and like for things like the repository server sizing, the compute resources, the raw disk and backup job considerations, like any RAID levels, stripes, IOPS, and so on, I will also share a best practice guide in the handouts for the session. That will be a bit later on. But as like in general, the general purpose Windows Server with just an attached storage can play the role of a backup repository and is usually a rather good option. Besides that, well, based on the experience of practical implementations, there are a few things to avoid, though. One of them would be probably to avoid low-end NAS and storage appliances. If there is no way to avoid them, it is recommended to use an iSCSI instead of the NAS protocols. Also, generally, you can avoid CIFS and SMB. If it is a share that is backed up by an actual Windows server, you can just add that instead. And if you use a virtual machine, so your repository is basically it's virtualized, just please avoid placing the backups on VMDKs, on VMFS volumes, and so on. So if we're talking about the Windows Server repositories, and if you want to have a hardened Windows Veeam backup repository, there are a few best practices, just an overall some advice. Well, first of all, it's the KISS design. KISS stands for Keep It Simple and Straightforward. Use a standalone Windows Server, which is not Microsoft, which is not a part of a Microsoft Active Directory domain. Then you can also make sure that, well, you should make sure that these repositories, like these servers, are physically secured. Please also use a local account with administrative active and rename the local administrative accounts if need be. So set the permissions on the repository directory to only that local accounts. You could also modify the firewall rules with dedicated rules just for Veeam to allow access to the specific ports. Disable the RDP services to the repository. And of course, last but not least, it is highly recommended to use the encryption for storing backups on this repository. Right, so let's see how we can actually add a repository into our infrastructure, right? So let me power on the lab. So this is the interface of Veeam Backup Replication. So to add a repository, it's rather simple. Just go from Home tab, you go into the backup infrastructure, you choose the backup repositories, and in the top left, you see Add a repository. So you press this button and you have multiple options. At this moment, we'll talk about the first two. So direct attached storage and network attached storage. So direct attached storage, the name stands for itself. So let's add Windows. We give it a name. We choose the server. We just go into the repository. Actually, let me click away from here and let me choose the existing one. So let's see this one, right? This one we have already added. And so again, so you choose the server, you choose the repository, you set the settings. Basically, it is all wizard driven. So in a few minutes, you will have it up and running. So this is pretty much it. Rather simple. If you want to add network attached storage, just choose the NFS share or SMB share, and the process, again, it is wizard driven. It is really straightforward. So in a few minutes, again, you'll have it up and running. Okay. So let's go back to, okay, so the demo bit we have already seen. Okay, advanced ReFS and XFS integration. So with the version 9.5, we have introduced an advanced ReFS integration. The ReFS resilient file system was the new file system of Windows Server 2016 back then. And with version 10, we have introduced a similar approach for Linux file systems and for XFS. The advanced integration supports ReFS and XFS volumes on internal and direct attached storage. Right, so the benefits of this pretty much is significantly faster synthetic full backup creation and transformation, as well as the reduced storage requirements and improved reliability. Even more importantly, well, this functionality improves availability of the backup storage by significantly reducing its load. So this results just in improved backup and restore performances and enables you to do much more with the virtual labs, like as an example, running off on the backup storage. And a bit more detail about, actually, let's talk about fast block cloning. So on the animation in this slide, we see the creation of a synthetic full backup and how it affects the backup repository on the repositories that use like more of a classical approach. So let's see the animation. Right, so when we create a synthetic full backup, the data blocks are being copied to build up the new VBK2 backup, but with fast cloning. Veeam backup and replication in this case just references the existing data blocks on the volumes instead of copying the data blocks between the files. So these data blocks are copied just only when the files are modified. The improvements of like the performance improvements of this would be just the reverse incremental backup doesn't consume any I/O, the compact full backup file, the creation of GFS backups using the synthetic method. GFS, by the way, stands for grandfather, father, son. So basically, these are weekly, monthly, and yearly additional backups. Then the synthetic, full operation happens almost instantly and is spaceless, and it also improves the merge of backup files. Whoops, apologies, let me go back. Yeah, so for Linux backup repositories, generally to use fast clone, you would just need to meet a few following requirements. Well, the file system, of course, it needs to be XFS in the first place. The Linux distribution must be also supported. And the Linux kernel should support the reflinks, so it's XFS data block sharing. Then the CRC, the cyclic redundancy check, also should be enabled. And the minimum supported data block size is 1 kilobyte, and the maximum supported block size is 4 kilobytes. It is a bit simpler for the Windows repositories. For Windows repositories, it should be just the operating system needs to be Microsoft Windows Server 2016 or later, or Microsoft Windows 10 Pro for workstations or later. The file system needs to be ReFS 3.1 or later. And in this case, we recommend this to use ReFS volumes formatted with 64 kilobyte cluster size. It is to provide better performance with large data volumes. Actually, about this, I would also highly recommend checking our help sensor guides if you want more information on this kind of functionality. Okay, so let's see a bit of the demo again here. So we have already seen the ReFS repository added here. So let's check its settings. Basically, if you want this functionality, you just add the repository with the previously mentioned prerequisites already set up, and this is all you need. So you don't need to do anything additionally, really. For Linux, it is just one step more. So after you have added the XFS repository, again, like from the add repository window, right? You just need to enable one tick, and this would be this. Okay, so yeah, of course, you give it a name, you just choose the repository server and so on. You go into the repository settings. Okay, that should take a few seconds. Yeah, so we're done. So you just need to enable this option, used fast cloning on XFS volumes, and this is pretty much it. So once you tick this one is done. No need to do anything else. Right, back to slides. So let's talk a bit also about the integration with the duplicating appliances. Right. Well, Veeam is known for being a storage agnostic solution. We're capable of writing backups to any targets, but well, additionally, on top of this core functionality, we do have specific integrations with storage appliances from certain vendors. They basically serve to improve the functionality and backup and restore performance. Currently, when it comes to these Hadoop appliances, we offer an integration with Dell EMC data domain with DD Boost, HP Store ones with Catalyst, Exagrid, Quantum DXI. So we generally consider these Hadoop appliances as a secondary storage for a longer term retention with good advantages for the large amounts of data sets with multiple backup jobs, retention, something from 1 year and probably more. But still, there can be some use cases where the loop appliances can also be used as a primary target as well. Now, whether you are using them as a primary target for the backup jobs or secondary target for the backup jobs, just please be aware that the integration is slightly different for each appliance. And I would strongly recommend just checking the guides where you will find some KB articles explaining this integration with the Hadoop appliances and some general recommendations. To be noted that within these KB articles, you will also find some references to the vendor-specific KB articles with some additional instructions for meeting the best practices, well, with this certain vendor hardware. For all the Hadoop storages and appliances, including actually also the ones that are not integrated, like such as Neverfail, Quest, NEC, QNAP, and so on. You will also find in the handouts that I will be sending later on. There's a second KB article link with general guidance around the duplication, explaining which are either the features that generally require a higher performance on the repository level, or the features that basically creates more random I/O, such as an example, instant VM recovery, data labs, the database point in time restore, but also fast restore from the longer backup chains for large VMs, probably the ones that contain like multiple virtual hard disks with terabytes of data and so on. So let's quickly see how do we add the Hadoop appliance. And again, it is really super easy. So we go again, add the repository. We choose the deduplicating storage appliance from here. So we choose which one we want to add. So, okay, let's say we want to add the Dell EMC. Right, actually, let me click away from here. So you, again, like you give it a name, basically the standard stuff. But let me click on this one since we already have added. So if you have noticed, besides these, the normal steps for like just a normal random repository, there is also this additional tab with integration. So in case of like Dell EMC data domain, there may be some additional options, like in this case, enable DD boost encryption, right? So like for certain vendors, like I told you, they can be a little different, but again, like the process is just going through these steps. Again, everything is very straightforward, wizard driven, easy and fast. So basically when you go through all these steps, you add the new appliance and you can start using it right away. Okay. So a few things about scale-out backup repository. So we have already seen this in the previous slides, but what exactly is a scale-out backup repository? So a scale-out backup repository is a repository system with scaling support for multi-level storage of data. So the scale-out backup repository basically consists of one or more backup repositories called the performance tier, so the first level. Right, and this performance tier, if needed, it can be expanded with some object storage repositories for long term retention and archive storage. These are called the capacity tier, and the archive tier. So all the storage devices and systems inside the scale out backup repository I joined one into one system, and with like all their capacities just summarized. Okay, so what are the benefits of the scale out backup repository, you may ask? Well, first of all, it provides a convenient way of managing the backup storage. It supports any backup target supported by Veeam, whether it is a Windows or Linux server with local or directly attached storage, network shared replicating appliances. Basically, all the features of any storage device or system are preserved within the scale-out backup repository. Then, of course, it allows you to set up detailed performance policies. This would be quite important for the loads. It provides practically any unlimited cloud-based storage capacity if you would want to use the cloud-based repositories. And you can instruct Veeam backup replication to offload data from these extents into the cloud for long-term storage. To be noted, in order to maximize the scale-out backup repository backup and restore performance, a careful design should be applied to the network itself. So the communication between these different data movers will inevitably increase the network consumption. So as a general recommendation, pretty much a network of 10 gigabit would be kind of the recommended minimum, to be honest. Okay, next one, let's talk. Okay, actually, yeah, let's see also the demo. Let's see how do we set the scale-out backup repository. So from the same window in the backup infrastructure, we have the scale-out backup repository option. Again, on the top left, we have add scale-out backup repository. So again, same wizard, everything step by step. So we give it a name, right? Then we choose our levels of scale-out backup repository, in this case, the performance tier. Actually, let's see much better the one that we already have. This one, in our case, is extended with AWS S3 buckets. So just again, like when you add a new one, you give it a name, you go into the performance tier. So you basically add your first level. This would be more of a local repository. It's like more of like for more recent backups, more access backups, let's say. And then you choose the placement policy. Placement policy basically can serve either for data locality. So if you want to place like all the backups into one extent, or if you want to tweak the performance a bit, you can just put incremental files on a different extent from the full backups. But this will depend on your use case. Then you choose the capacity tier. Capacity tier is the second level of scale-out backup repositories, and you want and where you can offload like different backups for a longer retention or maybe to save space. So you have a few options like copy backups to object storage as soon as they are created. So basically this serves to have two backups in parallel, like two copies of the same backup. And also you can move these backups to object storage as they age out of the operational restore window. So you can basically move these backups after a certain period of time. In our case, it's 7 days, right? And you can also encrypt this data with the tick from here. So once you have set the settings in this one, and yeah, of course, well, in order to add this object storage repository, you would need to add it into the tool first. So you would need to have the accounts. You would need to set up the account for it. Apologies. So once you are done with the capacity tier, you can go ahead and set up the archive tier. So again, same, you would need to have the AWS S3 archive tier account. So like Glacier, for example, already set up. So you just added. You set which GFS backups you would want to offload. Then you also have a bit of like additional options, so you can just like store archived backups as a standalone files, or archive backups only if remaining retention time is above the minimum storage period. So it's just a few additional settings from here, right? But once you are done with this, you just click apply, finish, and you are good to go with scale out backup repository. So you will see something like this in your Veeam backup and replication console. Right, so let's go a bit further on. So what about the air-gapped backups? So if you want to go beyond this 3-to-1 rule that we've been speaking before, you may want to use like one of the options that are mentioned here on the slide. So first of all, tapes. Yeah, tapes are a great cost and storage space ratio, and they last for longer and they get the job done. But if you actually like have used, you have worked with tapes, you may have a love-hate relationship with them, and that's normal. But still, tapes during the times of malware and ransomware and whatnot, they are really good option for keeping your data safe. It can also be used for archiving purposes or for compliance, for legal purposes. So in case if you need to keep the data for, let's say, 10 years as per your country's legislation, well, that's probably the way to do it. Another option would be the worm disk, so read once, read many, and also a repository with rotated drives. Although worth mentioning that also our Veeam service providers also do offer the backup as a service with insider protection, so that can be considered as an option. And well, last but not least, of course, the object storage that is compatible, and it has the mutability support. We also have the option to add that to the backup replication. So the solution can integrate with this common open standard object storage that has an immutability option, again, like on the file level. This property can be set once, but cannot be deleted during the immutability period, or of course until it expires, but not even by the root user. So you are basically getting the benefits of an air-gapped storage without tapes or without like any specialized storage appliances or equipment and so on. In the example of Amazon S3, object locking compliance mode offers exactly that for the duration of the whole retention period. But this also does not mean that you are necessarily tied to Amazon or any other of these like big hyperscalers or big providers. You can also use an S3 compatible object storage, which uses S3 buckets. Well, with this immutability also implemented, and they don't need necessarily to be the cloud ones. They can also be on premise. And of course, well, worth mentioning that Microsoft is about to, or actually maybe they have already implemented a similar solution just to stay competitive on the market. Yeah, so if we're talking like on the topic of immutability, so let's see how we can secure all of our backups from start to finish. And we've talked about the mutability for S3 and S3 compatible, and we've talked about scale out backup repository. And so this is why actually I've saved this part for the last. And I would want to show you like how you can harden your performance tier. So the first level of your repository using the hardened Linux repository option. Well, technically, actually, you don't even need to have a scale-out backup repository to use your Linux repo in this immutability mode. But yeah, so let's see actually. Well, worth mentioning that yes, Veeam backup replication is actually mainly Windows-based software, but it consumes Linux services as backup repositories without any issue. the main requirements would just be the bash shell, SSH, and Perl. One mention about this is that the 64-bit editions of Linux must be able to run 32-bit applications. And pure 64-bit Linux editions are not supported because of Perl, basically. So Perl installation must support 32-bit variables. So this is to be considered. But once you have these requirements done, you are pretty much good to go. So let's see how this immutability actually works. So after you add the hardened repository with immutability, step one, Veeam backup and replication creates a so-called Veeam analog file with the information about the mutability time period for each backup file in the active chain. So these log files are stored on a Linux host. Step two, backup files become immutable for the configured time period. So the minimum is 7 days, the maximum is 9,999 days. It is important to mention that the immutability period is extended only for the active backup chain. So if there are several backup chains in the backup, then Veeam backup replication does not extend the immutability for all the backups in the chain. And step three, so after the time period expiration, Veeam backup replication makes backup files not immutable again, so they can be deleted or modified. If we're talking about like quick best practices on this one, again, we are returning to the KISS design, keep it simple and straightforward. Again, of course, make the servers physically secured. It is a good practice to create a dedicated repository account for Veeam that can access only the folders where you store the backups. You set the permissions on the repository directory to only that account. Important thing is that you do not actually need root to use Veeam Linux repository. Also, you don't need, and please do not use the sudo on that. Then again, you can modify the firewall with dedicated rules for Veeam to allow to access to the specific ports. And again, as for Windows, you can also use Veeam encryption whilst storing backups in the repository. And okay, let's have a final look in the lab. Right, okay, so let's go to the backup repository tab once again. So we have this XFS repository that is already added here. So we have seen how we can enable the previous options, but we just go to repository and just it loads in a second. Yep, so basically the option you are looking for is this one, the second one, make recent backups immutable for, and you choose the number of days. So this is pretty much the only thing that you would need to do to make these backups immutable. So you just choose the number of days, you save it, you're good to go. And since we are here, actually, let's also have a look at the object storage immutability. Well, on the use case of AWS S3. So to remember, like we have different levels of our scale-out backup repository in AWS. So let's see the capacity. It's here, right? This is the second level of our repository. If we want to make the backups immutable on this one, like on this level, okay, we have the name, we have the account, so we provide the credentials to access the accounts, and then we choose the bucket, right? And again, we see just a tick, so make these recent backups immutable for, let's say, 30 days, but you can set your own number, of course. So depending on use case, you can leverage this number however you like. And this is pretty much it. So that's how you set the immutability on the capacity tier of scale-out backup repository. When you hit apply, finish, and so on. But you also have a possibility to add the immutability to the archive tier. So the longest term retention of your scale-out backup repository. Again, you give it a name, you provide the credentials, the accounts, you select the bucket, and you have this option. So the difference is that in here, you just make the backups immutable for the entire duration of the retention policy. So if you set it to 1 year, it would be immutable for this exact time. But again, it's just one tick, so it's very, very simple, right? And oh yeah, actually, let's see. Let's say you want to, like, once you have set up the immutability. Okay, we're going back to the Linux hardened repository, right? So if you want to check if your files are actually, like, if your backups are actually immutable, you can just go into Home. You select the list of your backups. You choose the disk, and you choose the backups that went into this immutable repository. You just open the arrow to see what backups you have here. You hit the properties. Right, so okay, so you see the number of objects that you have backed up, and you see the files, and you have this option of seeing it, that these backups are immutable until, and well, there is the date. Right, so that's basically, that's how you check if the immutability is applied, and until which points, like until which date. Okay, so okay, we have seen the demo, so this is pretty much everything that I wanted to show you today. So you have these resources, you will receive all these links after the session. I do recommend checking out actually these resources. So we have a great community. We have a community hub, we have community forums. So if you have questions, if you want to read some information, just please go ahead and see you over there. We have free tools. You can register for other live sessions. And of course, if you are interested, you can also read about Veeam licensing policy. So yeah, let's see if we have, okay, I do see a few questions from here. And actually, oh, well, we are seriously over time. I'm so sorry for that. But okay, let me see if I can answer at least, let's say, 2 quick questions. Okay, can a DR site also be built with Hyper-V? Yes, of course. So you are not locked in to like any, like, let's say there are no limitations for VMware. You can also use Hyper-V. The setup would be pretty much different, like on the Veeam backup server setup, but it still will be like the, let's say, the classic Veeam approach. And on the repository side, there will not be much difference, honestly. So will you share the presentation? Yes, the presentation will be shared. It will also be uploaded onto our website. So over there, you will see the recording of the session and also the slides. Okay, so I see also a few questions, but I would probably say that I much better answer them by email, since we are seriously over time and I really don't want to keep you for longer. But I promise I will get back to you by email. So if you will have additional questions, you can reply back absolutely at any time. And that was pretty much it. So thank you so much for your attention. Please register for other sessions. And thanks again, and have a good one.